Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
It was one of those days where everything seemed to be going wrong from the start. My car wouldn't start, so I had to call a cab to get to work. Then my boss dumped a huge project on me right before lunch, which meant I had to work through my break. By the time I left the office, I was starving and irritated. I decided to stop by the grocery store on my way home to pick up some essentials and maybe treat myself to something nice after the day I'd had. As I was walking through the aisles, I remembered I needed to withdraw some cash for my landlord, who only accepted cash payments for rent. It was a relief to know I could kill two birds with one stone by getting cash back at the checkout. So there I was, standing at the checkout line with my cart full of groceries. The store was packed, probably because it was right after work hours, and there was only one cashier on duty. No baggers in sight either. Great. I started unloading my items onto the conveyor belt, trying to be as quick as possible because I could feel the impatience radiating from the people in line behind me. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gave me a sympathetic smile as she scanned my items. The cashier commented on how busy the day was. I agreed and asked if it was always this crazy at this time. She explained that it was pretty much always like this and that management had been cutting corners on staff lately. I nodded, understanding her frustration. As she finished scanning my items, I inserted my debit card into the machine and started the transaction process. I was just about to select the cashback option when suddenly a hand reached over my shoulder and pressed the no button. I whirled around, coming face to face with a tall man in a business suit. I angrily asked him what he thought he was doing. The man had the audacity to look annoyed at my reaction. He explained that he was in a hurry and thought I was taking too long. I yelled at him, telling him that I needed cash back and that he couldn't just reach over and mess with someone else's transaction. The man tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. He even offered me $100 cash if that's what I needed. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crispy $100 bill, holding it out to me as if that would solve everything. I was fuming at this point. I told him that I didn't want his money and that this wasn't about the cash but about him thinking he could do whatever he wanted. The man rolled his eyes, clearly not understanding why I was so upset. By this time, other people in the line were starting to watch our exchange with interest. The cashier intervened, informing the man that she would have to cancel the transaction and start over because he had interfered with a customer's personal banking information. The man protested, saying he was already late for a meeting and asking if she could just let it go. The cashier explained that it was against their policy and that he would have to wait. Then the cashier canceled my transaction and started over. The entitled man behind me was tapping his foot impatiently, checking his watch every few seconds. I couldn't resist pointing out to him that if he hadn't tried to rush me, he would have been out of there by now. The man glared at me but didn't say anything. I took my time with the new transaction, making sure to get my cash back this time. As I was bagging my groceries, I overheard the cashier talking to another customer. I heard the cashier explaining to another customer that sometimes she had to do what she had to do when dealing with jerks. She admitted that she didn't mind taking a little extra time if it meant teaching someone a lesson in manners. As I left the store, I saw the impatient man still waiting in line, looking more frustrated than ever. It seemed like karma had a way of catching up to people who thought they could push others around. After retiring from the military, I settled into a quiet life in a small town. The transition wasn't easy, loud noises still made me jumpy, and crowded places set me on edge. But I was managing, taking it one day at a time. On this one day, I needed to pick up some groceries. I'd been putting it off, but my fridge was practically empty. I psyched myself up, got in my car, and drove to the local supermarket. It wasn't too busy, which was a relief. I found a spot right in front of the store and pulled in. As I was about to get out of my car, this woman in a fancy SUV pulled up behind me, blocking me in. She got out and stormed over to my window. I rolled it down, confused about what was happening. The woman angrily declared that the parking spot was hers and that she always parked there. I calmly explained that I didn't see any reserved signs and that it was a public parking lot. She retorted that she didn't care, insisting that she had been shopping there for years and everyone knew it was her spot. She demanded that I move my car immediately. I tried to reason with her, but she wasn't having it. She started pushing against my car door, preventing me from getting out. I politely asked her to step back, explaining that I wasn't going to move my car and that there were plenty of other spots available. She refused, threatening to call the manager or even the police if I didn't move right away. At this point, I was starting to feel trapped and I could feel my combat instincts kicking in. But I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this wasn't a war zone. I needed to handle this calmly. I attempted to defuse the situation by acknowledging her upset while stating that her behavior was unacceptable. I explained that I was a veteran and didn't respond well to being threatened or cornered. I suggested we both calm down and handle the situation like adults. The woman dismissively replied that she didn't care if I was the Queen of England, insisting it was her spot and I had to move. She started pounding on my window, and that's when something in me snapped. Not in a violent way, but I knew I had to take control of the situation. I got out of my car using my size and presence to create some space between us. I gave the woman a final warning, telling her to step away from my vehicle and find another parking spot. I informed her that her actions were bordering on assault and that I wouldn't hesitate to defend myself if necessary. She scoffed at my warning, claiming she wasn't scared of me. She tried to shove me, but years of training kicked in. I simply sidestepped her, causing her to stumble. She caught herself on her SUV, leaving a small dent with her elbow. The woman yelled that I had made her damage her car and threatened that I would pay for it. I calmly replied that I didn't make her do anything and that her actions were her own responsibility. By this time, a small crowd had gathered. Some were filming with their phones, others were just watching. A store employee came out to see what the commotion was about. The employee asked if everything was okay. The woman immediately accused me of stealing her parking spot and assaulting her. I countered her claim, explaining that I had parked legally and that she had been harassing me and trying to force me to move. I added that she was the one who had attempted to assault me. I turned to the crowd and asked if anyone had seen what happened. Several people nodded and confirmed my version of events. The employee then asked the woman to leave, stating that they didn't tolerate such behavior in their parking lot. The woman protested, still insisting it was her spot. The employee explained that there were no reserved spots in the lot and warned her to leave immediately or they would call the police. The woman looked around, realizing she had no support. With a huff, she got back in her SUV and sped off, nearly hitting a shopping cart on her way out. As the crowd dispersed, the employee turned to me. He apologized for the incident and asked if I was okay. I assured him I was fine, mentioning that I had dealt with worse. The employee shared that they had had problems with this woman before, but never this bad. He thanked me for handling it so calmly. Seriously, who would have thought that a simple grocery run would turn into a test of my military training? I've always been a hard worker, climbing the corporate ladder step by step. After years of dedication, I finally landed a job at one of the top firms in the city. The pay was great, the benefits were even better, and I was thrilled to start this new chapter in my life. The only problem? Living in the city is expensive. Really expensive. So, I had to compromise. I found a cozy studio apartment that fit my budget. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And the best part, my loyal companion, my dog, could live with me. When the pandemic hit, everything changed. The firm decided to let us work from home. At first, it was great. I could spend more time with my dog, save money on commuting, and work in my pajamas if I wanted to. But then came the new policies. The HR department sent out a long email about maintaining professionalism in a virtual workspace. Most of it was standard stuff, dress code, background noise, that kind of thing. But there was one line that caught my eye. No pets allowed during video calls. I thought it was a joke at first. I mean, we're working from home. Pets are part of home life, right? But no, they were dead serious. I figured it only applied to people deliberately showing off their pets or letting them interrupt meetings. My dog was well behaved and usually just napped in the background. It was a regular Tuesday morning. I was on a team call discussing our latest project. My dog was sleeping peacefully behind me, barely visible in the frame. Suddenly, my team lead's face darkened. They asked if that was a dog in my background. I nervously confirmed, explaining that he was just sleeping and not disturbing anyone. The team lead reminded me of the policy, stating that no pets were allowed during video calls and that this was a clear violation. I tried to argue that we were working from home and questioned where else my dog was supposed to go. The team lead dismissively told me it wasn't their problem and that I needed to find a solution or face the repercussions. The call ended awkwardly after that. An hour later, I got an email. Official strike for breaching company policy. I was furious. This was my home. Where was I supposed to put my dog? The only place out of view was the bathroom, and I wasn't about to lock him in there for hours every day. I vented to a coworker about it later. I expressed my shock at receiving a strike for having my dog in the background. My coworker sympathized, acknowledging that it was tough but reminding me how management could be about these things. I complained about how ridiculous the situation was and asked what I was supposed to do. That's when my coworker suggested using a virtual background. That's when it hit me. A virtual background. Of course. I spent that evening searching for the perfect image. I finally found it. A beautiful shot of dogs playing in a park. It was perfect. My little act of rebellion. The next day, I joined the team call with my new background. My dog was in his usual spot, but now hidden from view. I couldn't help but smirk as the meeting started. The team lead greeted everyone, hoping we were all adhering to the policies. I cheerfully confirmed, praising the new background policy and commenting on how it brought life to the calls. I saw a flicker of annoyance cross the team lead's face, but they couldn't say anything. After all, I was following the rules now, wasn't I? As the weeks went by, I noticed more and more of my coworkers adopting similar backgrounds. Dog parks, cat cafes, even a few exotic pets. It became a bit of a game, seeing who could find the most interesting pet-related background without technically breaking the rules. One day, during a company-wide meeting, the CEO himself commented on it. He noted that he had noticed a lot of interesting backgrounds lately and remarked that it was nice to see everyone embracing the virtual workspace. There were a few nervous chuckles, but I couldn't help myself. I quipped that we were just trying to keep the animal spirits high in these trying times. The CEO burst out laughing, and suddenly the tension that had been building for weeks dissipated. He admitted that they might have been a bit overzealous with some of their policies and suggested revisiting the no pets rule. And just like that, the ridiculous policy was gone. These days, pets making cameo appearances in video calls are met with smiles instead of strikes. As for my dog, he's become something of a mascot for our team. Turns out a little rebellion and a lot of creativity can go a long way in changing outdated rules. After a particularly stressful week at work, I decided to treat myself to a peaceful morning at the local park. It's become a sort of ritual for me, grabbing a coffee from my favorite cafe and finding a quiet spot to unwind. As I approached the park, the crisp autumn air filled my lungs. The leaves were starting to change color, creating a beautiful backdrop for my morning retreat. I spotted the familiar picnic area and made my way over, coffee in hand. The park was gloriously empty, just as I'd hoped. I chose a table with a nice view of the trees and settled in. Sipping my coffee, I pulled out my phone to catch up on some news and maybe tackle a crossword puzzle or two. About 20 minutes into my peaceful morning, I heard the unmistakable sound of a large group approaching. I looked up to see two couples, 3 kids, and what looked like a pair of grandparents making their way towards the picnic area. I didn't think much of it at first. There were plenty of tables available after all. But as they got closer, I overheard their conversation. One of the women excitedly pointed out all the tables and suggested they push a few together so everyone could sit together. One of the men agreed and said he'd go inside with the older man to order their food. As 2 of them headed into the cafe, the rest of the group hovered nearby, talking loudly. I tried to focus on my crossword, but their voices kept pulling me out of my concentration. Another woman in the group commented on how great it would be if they could get these tables together. I noticed her gesturing towards my table from the corner of my eye. I waited for her to address me directly, but she never did. She continued to complain, saying they couldn't all sit at one table and that they'd have to move the table. She added that it wasn't very good for them. Her comments seemed to be directed at no one in particular, just loud enough for me to hear. I could feel them hovering behind me, clearly expecting me to take the hint and move. But I didn't. I kept my eyes on my phone, scrolling through news articles and working on my crossword. There were at least 8 other empty tables they could use, but for some reason, they seemed fixated on mine. After a few minutes, I heard the rest of their group returning with their food and drinks. The second man suggested they squeeze in at one table for now, saying they could move the tables once I left. I heard them shuffling around, trying to fit everyone at a single table. The smell of bacon rolls wafted over, mixed with the sound of cups clinking and chairs scraping against the ground. As they started eating, I finished the last of my coffee. Normally, I might have left right away, but their entitled behavior had rubbed me the wrong way. So I decided to stay a little longer. I spent another 10 minutes enjoying the morning sun, pretending to be deeply engrossed in my phone. All the while, I could hear them struggling to eat comfortably at the cramped table. I overheard one of the women whispering, asking if I was ever going to leave. The man next to her sighed and told her to just eat her food, admitting they couldn't move now anyway. Finally, I decided it was time to go. I stood up, stretching leisurely, and made my way towards the cafe to return my cup. As I passed their table, I could feel their eyes on me. I heard a woman, who I mentally dubbed Karen, mutter that it was about time I left. I paused, turning to face them with a smile. I apologized sarcastically, asking if they needed the table and saying I would have been happy to move about 20 minutes ago if they had just asked. I wished them an enjoyable meal before walking away. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.